Yeah, let's record this meeting. Welcome everyone to our CHAOSS meeting. Today is August 28th. The topic today is to have a conversation about moving the social currency metric system from a metric into a program. The history of the social currency metric system is that we introduced it as a metric to CHAOSS with the release that was in January 2020, so 7 months ago. And based on the feedback we've been getting and the conversations we've had, a lot of in the social currency metrics system is really more a system and method and procedure for how to collect data, how to enrich the data, tag the data. And it's very different from other metrics that we are defining in CHAOSS, where usually metrics in CHAOSS are smaller. They say, okay, here's where you get the data and here's how you display the data. The metric system is not just looking at one piece of data or one piece of information, it's looking at different metrics. So when we looked at it again for the last release, Sean Goggins did a nice round of comments saying here are, I think he identified 7 or 9 smaller metrics that are all part of the metrics system. And so moving forward, we started the conversation of taking the concepts, the ideas, the procedures, everything that we've defined in the social currency metrics system and turning it into a program that actually makes use of CHAOSS metrics, similar to the CHAOSS community report, which is showcasing the software we have, showcasing metrics we have, but it's more of a way using the metrics. Similar, also, we have a program of the CHAOSS DNI badging, which is looking at how can we take the DNI metrics and make them useful in practice. And so we're thinking, at least that's the conversation we've had so far, that the social currency metric system is it's a program that is very similar, that takes smaller metrics and package them in a specific way and provide some guidance on how to use the metrics. One important thing to note here is also that the social currency metric system is the creation of Vinya and Dylan, who founded Socially Constructed Online. And as that company, they're providing professional services and consultancy around the social currency metric system, offering it as a service to implement and help companies use the system. So we want to be mindful of that as well. But the system itself is open source. We're free to document it, share it, and then if someone wants professional services, that's where Vinya and Dylan can provide that. And lastly, one last thing that I wanted to mention as we are kicking this off, we had a Google Summer of Code student, Ria, who has done amazing work over the summer of taking the social currency metric system and implementing it in the Grimoire Lab software that is part of the CHAOSS project. So we have the metric, we now have an implementation, and now we're talking about, so now we want to have a conversation about where do we go from here? Yeah, so that was just a little bit of history of how we got to this meeting today. I'm pausing here to see if anyone wants to add information or say something of why they are here, what their interest is. And whoever is taking these fabulous notes, thank you very much. These are fantastic. So I cannot hear you, but I see you. Sorry, Vinya. Maybe I'm muted. Am I? No, my audio is on.
I hear you. I just
Now I can hear you.
oh, hey, now it's working. Great.
Yes.
Well, yeah. So I guess the most important question is, it sounds like we have a basic plan. What are the regulations? Like, how is this going to work? So if we move into a program or a system, we're going to need a place to put it in CHAOSS culturally, a place to put it in GitHub technologically. We need a set schedule for maintenance and consideration, consultation. We need to know what the lines are going to be for what Socially Constructed is bringing to the project, and what CHAOSS will be bringing to Socially Constructed. So it sounds like those are the main big conversations: is where's this going to live? What are the contributions? How is it being maintained? And what are the primary stakeholders getting out of it? Does that seem like a careful consideration of those questions to discuss?
Yes, I think we need answers to all of those questions. And I don't have the answers. We have to come up with them. That's the fun part.
So I think as far as where it would live culturally, I think precedent has been set with the D&I badging program that there is a weekly meeting, just like a touch base, here's what's going on, meeting with whoever in CHAOSS or whoever wants to join to discuss whatever topics come up. So I think that that's a pretty easy thing that can be implemented, and I don't mind setting that up and running those if that's agreeable to everybody. If not, that's fine too. I don't want to assume.
I think especially during the early developments of the program as we are transitioning, I think it makes sense to have weekly touch points, and then we can extend that to bi-weekly or once a month when we have less to discuss.
Perfect. And I think as far as where it can live on GitHub, I mean, I think that's a pretty easy solve as well. Just set you up with a repo, right?
The question is whether yeah, I think we do need a repo because that's how we are organizing everything in CHAOSS. I was also thinking, because this is more of a documentation thing versus a code thing, maybe we can look at Git books just to have a more pretty display of what we are creating, similar to what the D&I badging is looking at right now. So
I would +1 that.
Me too. Particularly as D&I badging and the handbook are both ending up on Gitbook. That would make a ton of sense.
What about the metrics specifically? Because it sounds like even though the SCMS as a program is going to be hosted on Gitbooks, are we still going to be making the individual metrics that come out of the social currency metric system still live on GitHub as standard metrics? So we would create a metric for transparency, a metric for utility, a metric for consistency, et cetera.
Yes. Short answer, I think yes.
Yep, I agree. Because that's the workflow we have for having standard metrics, and then we can reference them within the program.
And
So
ultimately, oh, I'm sorry, Garrett, go ahead.
no,
I was just going to say, ultimately, the metrics, like in their final form, live on the web page. So they'll have nice visibility there. The GitHub repos are just kind of a way to capture the work in producing the metrics and then getting that work out to the web page.
Another complexity and consideration is that the SCMS considers metrics to be a living organism. And that's why we have the codex. That's why the codex is the most important part of the situation. So the way that individual communities within CHAOSS, like subgroups, sub-communities, consider transparency, utility, et cetera, they should be personalized so that those definitions mean something to that group. And I was talking to Elizabeth about this. She may be able to chime in because she's actually like using the system for CHAOSS. But as I understand it, we should have independently produced definitions for these metrics in these individual communities. And then the actual metric that pops up for CHAOSS, this objectivized, highly defined metric that we transition to other brand new groups, what we're looking for in the definition of those metrics seems less like a, so here's what it is, and more like a, so this is the culturally universal commonality in how these other smaller groups are defining it. So that seems to add a complexity, and we want to make sure, especially from socially constructed's perspective and from the SCMS's perspective, that those definitions are following the rule of generalization, because that's one of the more important rules in the system. A concept applies to B population only so far as C limitation. It sounds like the development then of these metrics might be following a slightly more complex process from the standard metric development process CHAOSS is used to.
Yeah, and to
You're
Venya's
muted.
point, oh, sorry. Can you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
Georg was
Yeah.
muted. I think he was trying to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Elizabeth
Go
can
ahead,
go
Georg.
first. Okay, what I was saying is I think it's okay if the process is different because the different working groups have different ways of defining metrics. And so I'm not concerned about what it takes to define these metrics. I just say, let's start the journey and figure it out along the way.
That's kind of what I was going to say anyway. So thank you, Georg, for saying it much more eloquently than I would have. I was just going to add, I think that this culturally universal definition is probably what we will end up landing on, because these are kind of I don't know if they're ambiguous, but I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter right now. What matters is, I think, where or in what context we develop these metrics. So is it going to be part of the value working group, or should we have a separate group that works on these? Or what do you all think about that?
I guess my mind has always been in the value working group, but now that you say that, I have to rethink that. But I still think that was my first thought, is in the value working group. This is where this originated, and I think the way the value working group is evolved with how Matt Broberg is kind of leading things, that the fit is certainly still there.
So would we have this just as a separate focus area then? Would it be like lump all of those, transparency, utility, all of those underneath like a little mini umbrella that just is for the SCMS within value?
Possibly.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay, well, maybe we can just see how it goes. We might change that.
Didn't we also already create a new focus area, I guess is what you call them, specifically because of the SCMS a few months ago, where we added social value to all participants. And that's like, isn't that where it currently sits? Does that suffice? Do we want to just rename that or create something completely new?
We have four focus areas right now: societal value, organizational value, individual value, and communal value. I can share my screen if you want to see them, but this was, I think, yeah, in part with the SCMS. I think it was also in part of the way the value working group was originally constructed was a lot around just economic value. And we wanted to kind of shake that up a little bit, or, kind of expand how we think about value in the world that we live. So I think it kind of a combination of all of these things kind of coming together was how these focus areas came to be.
Yeah, and that's why we built this social currency metric system, was to provide direct organizational value in part of the different departments in an organization that need a better social listening tool toward the wider community. So all of the key stakeholders are compiling and defining and measuring that data so that they themselves can take action based directly on what the wider community wants them to do. And I think that sits within several of these different focus areas. So as a part of the program, maybe the SCMS program should actually just adapt those focus areas as the main tenets, goals, and objectives of the program itself, rather than being lumped into any one.
So I think I agree, because I think I understand kind of where you're going. So with the point would be that the atomic metrics that come out of the SCMS, and the idea would be is that, I don't know how many there are, maybe half a dozen, 10, something along those lines, maybe, that would come out of the SCMS, that maybe it doesn't matter too much in terms of the absolute number.
Yeah, there are a grand total, including individual participant metrics.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 5 organizationally influenced metrics, which could probably go under organization. That's the standard.
Okay.
Utility, consistency, merit, and trust. And then on the flip side, coming out of social currency theory as a whole, there's 6 that community members have control over: identity, affiliation,
gotcha,
etc. So there's those. And then I think that Sean wanted to also define and identify the process metrics, as I understand his feedback.
Okay.
So there were, I think he mentioned defining customer sentiment, and I think codex was included as a metric. I don't know how the codex would be as a metric because it's a tool.
So maybe listening to you talk, maybe a dozen plus kind of metrics, and that those metrics can reside across focus areas within value, which I totally agree with. And then, I mean, really, then the like the big outcome is that these metrics, almost irrespective of what focus area they sit in, are aggregated in a way that brings us to the SCMS. And so I'd say sometimes the focus areas, they're good in the sense that they, within the working groups, kind of enable us to think about where metrics may live, but their assembly in the world is not bound. It doesn't have to be, they only come from one focus area. They can be aggregated in ways that are meaningful for a particular program or for a particular context.
So I think we can figure out the details of where we want to put individual metrics as we start the work on defining them. And for that, we have templates. So we have the metric template, and then when we start working on the metrics, we can start filling out those templates and then figure out where they fit. And we often change our minds along the way too. So it's not set in stone.
All right. So we're silent. So does that mean we're done, or are we moving on to the next item, whatever that might be? Or
I'm looking at
sorry, I
the
spent a lot of time just trying to note down. Like that was a meaty section of this meeting. But there are 3 more questions regarding how it's going to be maintained, what's being offered by Socially Constructed, and what is being offered by CHAOSS. So like the organizational lines and differences there. And then what are each of the key stakeholders wanting out of this? I think that defining individual goals will be a lot better if we do it first, rather than discussing organizational lines and stuff like that, because that sounds like a much harder conversation to have. And defining personal goals will be a little bit more helpful. So I think this is also one of the points where Ria and Valerio come in, because they're actually maintaining the actual product.
the implementation in Grimoire Lab.
Yeah.
Guys, I do have to step off. I have a meeting here, but I have been kind of taking notes of my own and everything, and I will talk to Vinny later for an update on the rest of the conversation.
Cool.
Thanks, Dylan. Take care.
Thank you for
Bye,
having me.
Dylan.
I'll talk to you guys later.
Yep. So I guess we kind of move into a more subjective question of what is everyone wanting out of the project? What are our personal goals, desires? What does the after image of this program working in the long term look like for all of you? What are you getting out of your participation?
So I want this, I really think the social currency metric system is a valuable way of understanding communities. And I want to have that documented in CHAOSS, so that as communities are looking for how do we understand ourselves, or companies, how do we understand our communities, that they can have a place to learn about it. And to, yeah, that's really it. Just like the rest of the metrics that we're designing for people to help understand community health, I think social currency metric system is a valuable component, valuable tool in that process. So that's what I want.
so I think it's the same thing that Georg is saying. So the CHAOSS project is about helping people understand the health of the projects that they care about, right? However, whatever categories of health they use to gain better insight. So the issue with the CHAOSS, or the way the CHAOSS project started, was that people and organizations and foundations didn't have really good insight to the open source projects that they cared about for whatever reason, whether it's for corporate innovation or for the release of open source that was former intellectual property, or for scientific reasons, whatever the context might be. But people didn't have a lot of insight with respect to the communities they cared about. And so my goal is that the social currency metric system is another way to provide insight for people to gain a better understanding about the health of the projects that they care about. So it's to help drive that goal of the CHAOSS project.
And then for me, selfishly, I want to know how our community is doing, what people are saying about us. And I also want to be able to experiment with trying different things to help our own community health, both with contributors and users as well. So I think this is a really interesting way to tweak the machine a little and find places where we can be better, so that we can be the healthiest that we can be, so that we can also take our experiences into the greater open source community. But I think that I really want our community to be as healthy as possible. So.
Yeah, so my personal, am I audible? Yeah. So
Yes.
my personal goal is just to help community leaders understand their community health in an easier manner. So the current implementation is a little bit tedious for a community leader to tag all the data sets, but I really wish that our implementation would be such that any community could easily adapt to it, could easily implement it within their system and make use of it and improve their community health as much as possible. So I really wish to see that happening.
Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Valerio.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, so the project was really interesting. I agree that it's a nice view to understand the health of a software project. But in my case, I'm focused on the technological part. So, for instance, the codex is something that interests me a lot, because it's a way to understand how your community is talking each other, how the community members are talking each other. So it's nice to see if at some point we can find a similar codex for different communities, and if we can generalize even more this system to like at an ecosystem level, not just a single project. And then there is also the part about the classification of comments that at the moment are we have to do manual tagging. But it could be nice to see if we can have something automated to speed up everything.
All right, and I guess that leaves me. So since Dylan kind of had to leave, I guess I'm kind of speaking for myself and also socially constructed, and to a limited extent, Dylan, though we'll try to make sure that we get his feedback. Does anyone want to take notes for me? Because true to form, being pretty long-winded, I do have some conversation. And I think that this is also going to work as a nice transition to discussing organizational level. So when I produced the social currency metric system, it came out of a sense of frustration with the fact that most communities were studying community health from a organizational economic perspective, as far as I saw it in brand communities. How do we monetize this? How do we scale this? How do we make this work for business imperative and goal? I think that's incredibly important. And I think that in that way, quantitative data, and I think CHAOSS has proved this point, quantitative data is incredibly valuable to determine the organizational goals, objectives, and ROI from an organizational standpoint. The thing that frustrated me was that people were not viewing these communities from a social scientific standpoint. They understood that the community was a socio-cultural phenomenon, but they continued to study it as if it was just a PR project or just a basic organizational campaign. Community is just this strategy that we're using to market, develop, and increase LTV. I think there's value in that, but I don't think that continuing to view a community in that respect is really beneficial to the health and well-being of the people who are participating in that community. It's very much so a bearish state. And to kind of contextualize that, I view communities much the way other people do as a beehive. Everyone is contributing, everyone's building, everyone's collaborating, everyone gets something out of it. And you could either be the bear and come in and say, hey, we have this thing, you should buy it. Or you can be the flower. Hey, we have these resources. We'd love to collaborate with you and connect with you. And if this is something that you want, we do have this to contribute. I think that so many metrics about community health are about figuring out when you can be the bear and when you can be the flower. They're both important. But the metrics, the way that we're telling whether or not we be the bear or be the flower, is very one-sided toward the people who have power in those communities. What I want to see in an implementation of the social currency metric system is more of a conversation and a collaboration brought on by social listening that focuses less on measuring behavior and more on measuring opinions, feelings, thoughts, where people are going. And I think that they both need to work in concert with one another. Kind of bringing this to ground. What I would like to see both personally and as socially constructed is I would like to see CHAOSS Project building out the qualitative aspects of these metrics to determine health more broadly in order to make it easier for communities individually to understand when being the bear and being the flower is more important. So that's my big goal / objective that I want to get out of this. More selfishly, however, I am trying to build a business. I am trying to build socially constructed using the social currency metric system. And the identity of socially constructed is that we are a full stack marketing firm that focuses on community management with a mission of ensuring that business presence in a community does not harm the health of that community. In that regard, I would like to see the implementation of the social currency metric system as Elizabeth is using it on a daily basis and as other contributors are trained on it. I would like to see it fulfill both the organizational mission and the main tenet that brought the social currency metric system to exist in the first place.
Could you describe that last part? I mean, you were trying to, I think, balancing the business that you're trying to run. So I don't think I totally caught the connection of like how those things connect.
Yeah, so personally, I want to see the SCMS make communities healthier. And I want CHAOSS to kind of embody that desire on a personal level. More organizationally, I want to see the SCMS change the way that businesses approach entering into a community. And when I say businesses, I don't just mean like actual entities. People who are heading up projects is also important. People who are building software. I want to see these primary stakeholders who have a lot of power and voice in their communities start to view their communities not just from the quantitative aspects of here are these metrics that are measuring behavior, but also here are the thoughts, feelings, and opinions when we do our social listening through the SCMS. So organizationally, I would like to see the SCMS be used to change the behavior and actions of those stakeholders. Personally, I would like to see a greater amount of qualitative health in the communities as a whole. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I mean, so I think from a qualitative perspective, we are doing things in the CHAOSS project. In the D&I working group, we do a lot of qualitative work there that's not just built on the trace data. So I think we're in line, the digital trace data. So we've been very conscious that many of the software tools, like the actual pieces of software, can't actually implement many of the metrics that we care about because it takes people to go out and ask hard questions. And so we're very much in line with that as well.
And that's why I think it's such a good fit. I think that my goals in this project are going to be rather handedly accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I think that was maybe your first point, just with respect to kind of broadening the way that we think about health and continue to kind of cast that wide net that health can be understood in a variety of different ways, in a variety of different data sources, and totally agree. And then the second was, is it about connecting with the CHAOSS project to help articulate what the SCMS is, or is it to is that what it's about?
Yeah.
Is it about to give you visibility, you know what I mean, for the work that you're doing? Because this is, I mean, these are all real reasons why people connect with open source projects. So I don't mean these as like leading questions to which
I totally agree. I think that to kind of bring it back to ground, what I would like to see is greater use cases of the SCMS proving ROI of the community for organizations using qualitative data that is based on social scientific processes. And that would be a proving project. It would be a use case and case study that we at Socially Constructed can use in order to garner reputation and bring in clientele.
Totally fair. And so I would, so I think maybe the correlate, listening to you talk, Venya, the correlate like is if there are organizations that are interested in digital trace data and using the software tools from the CHAOSS project, we within the project rely on folks like at Bitergia or folks at Augur to tell us what those stories are, because those are the individuals that are kind of doing this in practice, right? And they're the ones that are out in the field observing how they're kind of like how the SCMS would live in practice, observing how this actually lives in the world. Mm-hmm. Same with like the DNI badging program. So this is a way for us to bring qualitative measures into the lives of event organizers and into the lives of projects so that they can think more deeply around DNI with respect to their events or their projects. And again, we kind of rely on the individuals who are involved in the DNI project to kind of bring those stories back to us so we can improve the program and we can tell the stories about how the badging program helped an event think about their code of conduct or helped an event think about their family friendliness. So, and I think this is exactly what you're talking about. It's just kind of one of these lines. So in terms of thinking about how SCMS improves the way that organizations think about community health, we'll likely have to, at least this is my thought, we'll likely have to rely on you and Dylan to bring those stories back, because you're the ones that are doing this as a job, right? I mean, you're the ones that are trying to implement this to build a business. Totally, completely cool. But the hope would be is that you can then write the blog posts, or you can talk about it in the community meetings, or you can present this work when we have CHAOSS cons again, you know, whatever the ways to get that word out. But I really think that you and Dylan, and I don't know if are there any other people, you and Dylan and?
There are a few people who help us build and contribute.
Okay.
More of an outside community thing. The only people working for Socially Constructed are Dylan and I.
Okay. But the two of you then represent like the trusted source of how this is working in the field. And you probably, you'll get it right. You'll get the story right as it needs to be told. And like if I told the story about how it lives in the field, I may not quite get it right. Right. And so I think that will be important as well, because we do rely on folks from Bitergia, we rely on folks from Augur, we rely on folks from the DNI badging program to tell us how these things are living in the world and making a positive impact in the lives of people.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, so Thanks. Sorry to be on my soapbox as long as I was, but thank you for making my rant succinct.
No, I think it's super important to make sure that like it's like not one-sided, I guess, right? So the hope is that this can improve health for everybody, and we all do come at these things from different perspectives, and it's important that we're not like two ships in the night kind of passing past one another, totally missing.
Yeah, so the next question then is, we know our goals and we know our objectives. So what are we all contributing? What is maintenance going to look like? And at the end of that, what is the organizational promise that is being made between CHAOSS and Socially Constructed? So I guess we can go through with personal maintenance. I don't like the word promises, but like contributions. Contributions is good word.
Yeah, this isn't a contract, right? I'll let somebody else speak for I spoke before.
So I think it's pretty obvious what my contribution is, but just for the record, just keeping it going, keeping tagging things, maybe importing new data. I guess that's TBD, if it will automatically do it or if I need to run a script. Either way, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I would also like to notify other people every week or whenever, bi-weekly, whatever it is, about kind of how our dashboard is changing, how our what trends I see, things like that. So that's my contribution.
I can also help with bringing people together and working on this, working it out, working through the details, defining the metrics, reviewing it, putting it on the website, writing about it, just like I do for all the other working groups that I'm involved in, with Common and D&I being the main ones, and value. So yeah.
I think my contributions are so I try to look across the CHAOSS project in its entirety constantly, and always thinking about where parts of the project maybe need a little bit more attention, or how we can better bring things to light. So one of my goals is I never want to have something in the CHAOSS project that is just work for work's sake. Like, we don't want to just capture things just because we can capture them. So we really want to make a difference in the way people think about health. And so how we ensure that the programs that we have and the metrics that we're developing and the outreach that we're doing all kind of works collectively is something that I do often. And so I guess my point is like making sure that SCMS is getting the attention that it needs in these weekly meetings and, say, the value working group, making sure that work that's occurring in other places in CHAOSS that may be a correlate to SCMS, that those two ideas are brought together. Or if SCMS can impact the way that we think about, I don't know, say D&I badging. I have no idea if it does, but if the conversation seems to be aligning, kind of bring that together. So trying to reduce the redundant work that's in the project, but also making sure that the work that we are doing has an impact in the lives of people. So I run every day, and these are the things I think about on my run, literally every day. I don't run with music. So just thinking about the dark corners of the CHAOSS project.
That's really nice. I think my contributions could be, I'll be on and off contributing to the CHAOSS project. Also, I think I'll be tweaking a little bit of code here and there whenever we see that here's a usability problem or we see that we have to pull out new data, but we really don't have a new method to do that or something like that. So a little bit of tweaking here and there will definitely be, I can contribute to it.
Okay, in my case, I can, since I was involved more on the technical part, I mean, I can help on assisting RIA if he needs some help to debug or implement things. So, I mean, basically my help can be on that side, on the technological part.
All right, and I think we have like 7 minutes to kind of flesh out the last question, which I think involves brass tacks, like what does the organizational partnership and collaboration look like between Socially Constructed and CHAOSS? So Georg, if you'd be willing to take over notes, I'd like to start with what Dylan and I are comfortable with, because we've already kind of talked about this. So what we feel we can offer, we want to maintain the SCMS from a cultural standpoint. We can't do anything technologically, and I think that should be clear. Like Ria and Valeria will handle tech. We can handle technological stuff, cultural stuff, ensuring that the process still continues. So when Elizabeth is tagging content, if Georg is helping tag content and you have questions about your codex, just come to us, it's fine. No charge in any way, shape, or form. Essentially what we're offering is a free retainer. Alongside that, if you need assistance or want help training people to continue maintaining the codex or coding or anything like that, we're happy to help. We're happy to be here. We will train people in your project to run the SCMS. I would like to keep actual coding from us limited, because I think that the people who actually are coding should come from CHAOSS. I do think that we, as a primary organization, are still key stakeholders in the community. So that social listening needs to be enforced on our end as well. We need to make sure that we're closer to the conversations and data. So I think that Dylan and I will be a part of every collaboration, of every calibration meeting that is out there. I think that that's really important. I don't think we should be leading those anymore. I think that Georg, Elizabeth, Ria, and Valerio have now gotten to the point where running your calibration meetings yourselves as your community is going to be critical to the future implementation of the SCMS. So to kind of summarize, we're happy to offer retainer for free, be a part of calibration meetings, consultations for free on SCMS. And then there are parts of CHAOSS that we are interacting as community members, not as a part of our organization. That includes the podcasts. So Dylan and I are fairly confident that we can continue our roles within CHAOSScast without involving the organization at all. Things that are not a part of this that Dylan and I have discussed, and again, there is negotiation viable here. Marketing and consultation outside of what has already been discussed and promised for the SCMS, we would like to wrap that in under Socially Constructed as a standard service. So we would just offer that. However, naturally, this relationship has been incredibly prosperous for Socially Constructed. We do still owe you more or less intangible benefits. So we're fine with a discount on services or a number of free options, and we can discuss that later after the meeting. We can kind of flesh that out. So our full stack marketing expertise will essentially come at discount as far as that goes. So if we just involve that relationship, it's there. I also want to make sure that the relationship between socially constructed and Bitergia, a separate entity from CHAOSS, is also discussed at some juncture. So that's where we are for socially constructed. What we would like in exchange is literally just in exchange for us being on retainer for CHAOSS. If anyone uses the SCMS or anything like that, they are referred to our organization. Referral links are definitely an option. And as a business, we just want to be able to make sure that that funnel remains open, clear, consistent, optimized, and that it brings in clientele. That having been said, the podcast in and of itself is a really important funnel for us as well. Obviously, I am on it. It is an expertise play, and Dylan is doing editing for it as well. So I think that that relationship is already well established. CHAOSS side, I guess, and I can take over.
Yeah, I think we're going to need to talk about this. This isn't normally how we would do things. So we don't really enter agreements like this, like with retainers and promises of leads.
Well,
so this isn't how the open source.
I'm not looking at this as an agreement in any way. I'm looking at this as saying, these are what our goals are, and this is what socially constructed as a company views it as. So I'm not looking at an agreement. I'm just looking at goals and objectives and what we get out of it and what you get out of it. And I don't care if there's a written document or anything like that. I just want the lines to be clear, is it.
This is a harder one for me. And I think will require more than the minute that we have. Just
yeah.
Because this is an open source project and people can come and go as they please. It's hard for us we really can't provide a guarantee of any sort of service or an increase of business. That's just not, and Garrick or Elizabeth can chime in, but that's just not what we do.
Yeah. And that's largely why I just kind of want to set the lines clear as an organization. But I'm not really caring about written agreement in any way. And I want you to be able to take as much time as you want. As socially constructed, like we've set that forward. Here's what we're looking at. Here's what that means. Here's what our relationship, as far as we're concerned, might look like. And we just want to hear what your side looks like, if that makes sense. And I know that this is super structured. I know that this is very business-like. We just feel that for the future of socially constructed, having that line in the sand is important.
I think it could be something a little less formal, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the same way we would approach Bitergia if we're having a conversation with someone and we can tell that it's kind of getting outside the realm of CHAOSS and it's going to require a lot more like hands-on work and detailed consulting work, we would just refer that org to Bitergia. So I think that's what Vinny is saying, like not necessarily a promise of leads or anything like that, but just like if there is, if someone is needing a little more personal or a little more in-depth work with this stuff, then we could just refer them to them.
So one of the things that I can, maybe we should take this to another meeting because we are out of time. I don't want to take up any more time, but I can also share the experience that we have in Bitergia and how we have done this. And I think what Vinya is outlining are their hopes for engaging with CHAOSS, not so much looking for precise promises from CHAOSS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because I guess maybe it sounded like promises that I just think we can't commit to.
Yeah.
At least that's my first reaction.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that there's a difference in structures between the two organizations, especially since this is an open source community. And the way that that structure works may differ between the two. I think that as far as any form of line in the sand or anything like that, we can look to CHAOSS's relationship with Bitergia as an example template, more or less. But we just, as we build out socially constructed, we want to know what we as an organization are offering, and what that means for our ROI.
Yep, well, certainly. Shall we reconvene next week, same time?
I'm good.
Works for me.
And I'm sorry if it seems like that conversation blindsided you in any way. I don't want it to sound or seem like that. I just want it to be as clear and structured as possible, speaking on behalf of an organization. Because as a person, CHAOSS has come to mean a lot to me. And I have to navigate those roles.
Oh, totally understandable. And I'm a super, that didn't blindside me. So, but I think it's an important discussion, and that we just kind of work through it, because I think that's totally possible.
Yeah. So yeah, let's think about it over the course of the week, and then return to the agenda next week. And then hopefully we should be able to get a better picture of what this looks like moving forward and just start.
Shall we make this a recurring meeting for working on this SCMS program, or is it a different time that we want?
I would prefer not Fridays, but
I think the original plan was to just adapt the meeting that we had with Ria to a session. But if we do need to change it, we need to adapt to the wider organization to make sure it's accessible. So
what is your Ria? What is the time that you meet with Ria?
It's the hour before this time.
Yeah, so Mountain Time, it's 8 a.m. Every Friday.
Okay, so it's even a couple hours earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can make that change. Another option is we can just have the SCMS, because it's a part of the value working group. We can just have the SCMS run around that same time. So like every other week when the working group coincides, the next day or an hour after, or something along those lines.
I like that, because we have the standing time for value. We can still meet next week on Friday, maybe at the same time, just to kind of sort out the details that we talked about today. But then in terms of the regular SCMS meeting time, we can always slot time into the value working group. And I mean, it could take the entire time sometimes, it could take 0 time sometimes, kind of depending on, and I'm sure Matt Broberg would be fine with that.
Yeah, I also think that is really critical as well. I want to make sure that the rest of the value working group understands how this meeting went, and they can catch up as well before we ever make any succinct decisions on any portion of this.
Fair.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Yep.
Have a good weekend.
I will hang on the line just in case anyone needs me.